There's more than 7 continents on our planet.
Apart from Atlantis, another lost civilization that is said to have sunk into the sea.
The lost continent is called Argoland. That might sound like something from the Lord of the Rings, but Argoland is believed to have been a real microcontinent, which split off from Australia 155 million years ago.
Scientists have discovered a hidden continent called Argoland, and scientists can't believe it. It's amazing to think there's more than just 7 continents on Earth. This lost land could give us clues about our planet's future. What are the implications of this discovery that is making the scientific community so nervous? Let us explore the hidden truths about this forgotten continent that will change our history forever. Hunt for a giant missing continent. Scientists have been on the hunt for a huge piece of land that disappeared over 100 million years ago. While researching Earth's history is pretty common, this search is for a continent as big as the United States, not just a small piece of land. For a long time, geologists thought maybe a massive part of what we now call Australia just vanished into thin air. Some thought it was probably hiding under the ocean, out of sight. Thanks to a dedicated Dutch team who spent 7 years digging into this, we've learned that parts of this giant landmass are actually buried under the lush forests of Southeast Asia. Think of the continents we know today as parts of a big picture that used to fit together. You can see this for yourself with a fun activity. Print out a world map, cut out the continents, and try putting them together like a game. You'll see they match up pretty well. For example, South America lines up perfectly next to Africa. If you pretend the oceans that have formed over the past 200 million years aren't there, you get a supercontinent shaped like a giant sea, which scientists call Pangaea. It was surrounded by a huge ocean called Panthalassa, with a smaller sea inside the sea, called the Tethys Ocean. This smaller sea is where it gets interesting. Back in the time of the dinosaurs, the Jurassic period, a continent named Argoland disappeared, leaving what's now known as the Argo-Abyssal Plain in Australia. Geologists first thought this happened because of subduction. That's when one part of Earth's surface goes under another part and gets recycled inside the planet. This idea explains how India ran into Asia and created the huge Himalayan mountains. However, figuring out Argoland was a bit more complex. Pieces of it turned up in places like Myanmar and Indonesia, but these bits looked way older than when Argoland was supposed to have split from Australia. This made scientists wonder how many other pieces of land might be out there, showing up in unexpected ways. Recently, scientists have finally put together the whole story of Argoland. It didn't just sink or disappear. It broke into smaller parts called microcontinents and moved away from Australia. These little land pieces eventually settled in the jungles of Southeast Asia. This discovery helps us understand better how big land masses break apart and come together, revealing a lot about old climates and how different plants and animals have spread around. Like, take the Wallace Line. It's an invisible boundary in Indonesia discovered by a British explorer named Alfred Russel Wallace over 150 years ago. He found out that animals on one side of this line are very different from those on the other side. It's like a natural divide between species like marsupials and tigers. Also, a while back, Australia split from Antarctica and ran into Asia. This big move changed the landscape and the types of animals found on either side of the Wallace Line. Recent research shows this bump, and the changes in the weather made it easier for Asian animals to live in the Malay archipelago. The Australian animals, though, didn't adjust well. It was too hot and humid for them, and they struggled with the island life. This shift towards Asia might even help us understand a recent archaeological find. In a hidden cave in the Philippines, a team found bones from a new type of ancient human, which they named Homo luzonensis, dating back about 50,000 years. This could be a big deal for figuring out how humans evolved in Asia. The bones had an odd mix of features, small teeth like ours, but hands and feet more like our ancient relatives. This unusual combo might be telling us about our long-ago connection to other lands, showing how the constant shifting of Earth's surface affects all living things. After discovering Argo Land, we learn that continents might come together again, changing our planet, Earth's next supercontinent. Although the continents we live on haven't changed much in our lifetimes, that doesn't mean they'll stay the same forever. They broke off from a giant landmass long ago, and they're likely to come back together in the distant future. A European university geologist has been trying to figure out what the Earth might look like many years from now. He started his research based on a unique earthquake that shook Portugal in 1755, where the tectonic plates did something unusual. After studying this for several years in 2016, he suggested that the places where these plates meet are starting to break apart, which could lead to significant changes. Imagine a car windshield that starts to crack. Something similar might be happening deep under the Earth's surface. This could create a zone from the Mediterranean to past Ireland, where the Earth's surface could be forced downward, leading to volcanoes, earthquakes, and new mountain ranges. If his predictions are correct, the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans could eventually merge into one vast ocean. And instead of the 7 continents we know now, we might see a new supercontinent. He named this potential supercontinent Amasia, as it would likely have Australia and the Americas at its center. But this scenario is just one possibility among several. Another concept is what some call the New Pangaea, which imagines the Atlantic Ocean staying open while the Pacific closes. Then there's another scenario called Amarsia, where the Arctic Ocean would close up, with the Atlantic and Pacific remaining open, and all the land masses shifting north, except Antarctica. Or consider Pangaea Ultima, which involves the Atlantic's growth slowing down, and a new subduction zone starting on the east coast of the Americas. No matter which scenario happens, if the continents merge again, it might not be the most comfortable situation. It's expected that in about 250 million years, Earth could become extremely hot and humid, kind of like being stuck in a sweaty, wet bag. The coasts might be the best places to live, while the inner parts of the continents could become blazing hot deserts. The survival of many animal species could be at risk, and humans would have to get very inventive to handle the extreme heat. These theories are useful not just for curiosity, but because they help us use digital models to explore different outcomes. These models are amazing tools that can also assist in studying climates on other planets outside our solar system, which is essential for planning future space missions. The concept of parallel worlds has always caught the imagination of scientists, even though we're not yet able to prove or disprove it. However, it has led to many unusual tales about visitors from other realities. One well-known story from 1851 involved a man named Jofar Voren in a small German village named Frankfurt an der Oder. Voren, who didn't speak German well and had a strong accent, claimed he came from a place called Laxaria, located in a region named Sacria, which was supposedly across a vast ocean from Europe. However, no such places are found on any map of our world. He said he spoke languages called Laxarian and Abramian, which are unknown on Earth. Voren was looking for his brother after surviving a shipwreck and ending up near the village. When shown a map and a globe, nothing looked familiar to him. He described his world as having 5 main continents: Sacria, Aflar, Aslar, and Upar. His tale was intriguing enough that local scientists decided to send him to Berlin for further examination. However, on the way, Voren had what seemed to be a seizure, jumped from the carriage, and disappeared into the forest, never to be seen again. The inspector responsible for his transfer speculated that Voren might indeed have been from another world and somehow found his way back, vanishing as suddenly as he had appeared. Driving on a quiet road can lead to places that don't seem real, with tales of disappearing cars and strange sightings. Vanished car on a quiet highway. Back in 1969, on a regular day in October, 2 businessmen, LC and his partner Charlie, found themselves driving down a quiet stretch of Highway 167 in southwest Louisiana. They were heading towards Lafayette, a busy oil town, and were deep in a work-related chat. It was pretty quiet on the road until they noticed an unusually old car in front of them, moving slowly. This car looked like it came straight out of the 1940s but was in surprisingly good shape, as if someone had taken great care to maintain it. Curious, Elsie and Charlie slowed down to get a better look at this well-kept piece of history. As they got closer, they saw that the car had a bright orange 1940 license plate. The driver was a young woman, dressed in old-fashioned clothes complete with a hat adorned with a long feather and a heavy fur coat, which seemed out of place in the warm weather. A child, dressed similarly, was with her. When Elsie and Charlie looked at her face, they saw she was panicking, almost ready to cry. Elsie, concerned, shouted to ask if she needed help. She nodded, so he gestured for her to pull over. They stopped too, but as soon as they did, the old car with the woman and child just disappeared. They were stunned, scanning the empty road, but there was no sign of her. Another driver came by, saying he'd seen everything, and he too was baffled by how the car just vanished. Elsie and Charlie were so disturbed by what happened that they talked about it all the way to the city and even reported it to the police. But without any proof or other witnesses, the police couldn't do much. The story got some attention locally, but soon was forgotten. In May 1972, 4 college friends, Jenna, Carol, Lisa, and Bethany, were driving late at night through southeastern Utah. Jenna was driving her dad's 1971 Chevrolet Nova. They were trying to get back to their college dorm before the housekeeper locked up for the night. It was after 10 p.m., and they were on Highway 56, which is pretty empty, just desert scenery around. They were relieved to finally see the railroad crossing at Medina, but right after that, they faced a decision. 2 roads appeared, one leading into the desert and the other towards Gadianton Canyon. They chose the Canyon Road, hoping it would be a shortcut. However, the road suddenly turned from asphalt to white cement and abruptly ended at a tall rock wall. They had no choice but to turn around, but as they did, Jenna and her friends noticed that everything had changed. The desert was gone, replaced by fields, woods, and a lake, all under a bright full moon, which was odd because there shouldn't have been a full moon that night. Confused, they drove towards a light that looked like it might be a diner, hoping to ask for directions. But the sign outside the building was in symbols none of them recognized. People came out, looking shocked and scared at the sight of Jenna's car. Things got weirder when Lisa tried to talk to them. She screamed and told everyone to leave immediately. As they drove off, some strange vehicles, egg-shaped and with 3 wheels, started chasing them, making buzzing sounds. In a panic, Jenna hit the canyon wall, and suddenly, everything went back to normal. They were in the desert again. They were physically okay, but Lisa was really shaken, insisting they had seen non-human beings. They managed to stop a highway patrol car and told the officer everything, but even the police couldn't make sense of their story. The tire tracks ended strangely, and no one could figure out where the girls had been or what had happened. The incident remains a topic of discussion and speculation, with no clear explanation available. These stories talk about traveling between different dimensions. There's actually no solid proof to support these stories, but they're still quite captivating. Take, for instance, the famous tale about a man from Taured who was initially thought to have come from another dimension. It turned out he was just a con artist named John Allen Kuchar Zagros. Even though the real story was more ordinary, the intrigue around such tales doesn't fade away. Stories about other worlds are exciting, but deep inside the Earth, hidden layers help us understand how our planet works. Layers of Earth revealed. Let's talk about how the Earth is structured. It's a bit like a layered cake. At the very center, you have the core, which itself is split into 2 parts, the inner core and the outer core. The inner core is solid, made up of nickel and iron, and it's super hot, like the surface of the sun hot. Then there's the outer core, which is molten and almost as hot as the inner core. Above the core is the mantle, and right at the top is the crust, which is the part we all live on. However, recent scientific findings have thrown a bit of a wrench into what we thought we knew. Scientists have discovered a new layer way down inside the solid inner core. Studying these deep parts of Earth is really tough. It's not like we can just drill a hole and pop down for a look. It's more like trying to figure out what's in a room when you're looking through a foggy, dirty window. But scientists are clever. They use lab experiments where they heat and squeeze rocks to mimic conditions in the core. They also study the way shock waves from earthquakes travel through the Earth. These waves move differently depending on what they're passing through, which gives clues about what's down there. When an earthquake happens, it sends out these shock waves. A recent big study looked at waves from 100,000 deep earthquakes, some of which originated over 60 miles underground. When these waves travel from one side of the Earth to the other, they change based on what they pass through. By studying these changes, scientists discovered this new layer in the core. Normally, these waves travel straight along the equator, but deep down, they start to shift and can go off course by about 60 degrees. When the waves travel north to south through the inner core, they move faster than when they travel parallel to the equator. This kind of detail helps scientists understand what's really going on inside our planet. Why do we care about the core so much? Well, the core is responsible for creating the Earth's magnetic field. This magnetic field is super important because it protects us from solar winds. These are streams of charged particles that the sun blasts out into space. If it weren't for the magnetic field, these particles could strip away the atmosphere that shields and protects our planet. Did you know the Earth actually has a kind of heartbeat? Discovered in the 1960s, the Earth subtly vibrates every 26 seconds. It's so gentle that we don't feel it, but with the right tools, researchers can detect it. Some think this regular pulsing could be because of the way ocean waves crash against the continental shelves. Think of how waves break over a beach, but on a gigantic scale. For example, imagine a spot where North America's high ground suddenly drops off into a deep ocean trench. Waves hitting this specific spot could be what causes these regular vibrations. It's like tapping a drum at just the right spot to make a sound that fills the room. If this is true, it's a good thing we don't have too many spots like this, or we might feel more of these vibrations. Another group of researchers thinks this might be due to a volcano near Sao Tome, in the Bight of Bonny, adding another layer of interest to our understanding of our planet's inner workings. When you're out there walking, leaping, or just standing still, it might feel like everything stops moving. But guess what? Even when you're just standing there, you're actually moving. That's because our Earth doesn't ever really stop. It's always spinning. If you're standing right on the equator, you're moving super fast through space, over 1,000 miles per hour fast. Think about spinning a basketball on your finger. The middle part, or equator, of that basketball goes around a lot farther and faster in one spin than the parts closer to your finger. Now let's talk about how our Earth is kind of like a big recycling machine. The ground we walk on isn't just sitting there. It's part of a big cycle that changes rocks from one kind to another. Magma that comes up from deep inside the Earth cools down and turns into rock. That rock gets pushed up by things like volcanoes and earthquakes, ending up on the surface. Over time, wind and rain wear it down into small pieces. These pieces pile up and get squished into new types of rock, like sandstone. Then, these rocks might get buried deep under the ground again, where they change even more because of all the heat and pressure. This whole cycle keeps going on and on. We've only checked out about 5% of our oceans. There's a whole lot going on under the sea that we don't know much about. Deep beneath the ocean floor, there are tiny organisms living in the sediments, even as deep as 1.5 miles down. And get this, there are microbes living inside the volcanic rocks below the sea floor, way under hundreds of feet of mud. These little guys don't grow or split into new cells very often, maybe once every few decades or even centuries. Is Argoland just a fascinating discovery, or could it change everything we know about Earth's history? Tell us your thoughts, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more.